Brother Cam provided me with this. I made a multiplayer game from scratch because no one is hiring junior devs. Everyone has a to-do app. This guy doesn't do a to-do app. Builds a game. Guess who's probably going to get a job? This guy. He's actually doing something. Build something. Like, do something actually for real. You know what I mean?
I've been feeling quite a bit stuck at my programming adjacent day job lately, which led me to the misadventure known as the software job hunt in year 2024. So
Dang.
to prove some basic computer literacy and add yet another non-consequential project
Welcome to Costco. I love you.
I forgot to turn off alerts, didn't I?
resume, I embarked on a quest to make a multiplayer browser game. By the way, the game is already
Wait,
available.
what did that say? Because we thought it would be easy. This actually is the greatest phrase ever for every software developer. Every single time I do anything, my first thought is, this shouldn't take too long. Why is making the game a good idea? The reason why making a game is a good idea is that games are exceptionally hard. There is so much about making games that is difficult. You have to integrate with a bunch of different stuff. If you write your own math library, you can talk about that. If you have multiplayer, you can talk about how you decided to sync everything together. If you do anything, there's so much to talk about when it comes to gaming. Whereas when you build yet another React to-do app, what are you there to talk about? What can you even remotely talk about other than nothing? Because here's the thing, is that if you get a chance to get in front of somebody and you talk passionately about any topic in tech, if you have a remotely competent interviewer, they can start going, oh yeah, tell me about that. How'd you do the networking? Oh wow, you did your own TCP. Okay, cool. Okay, oh, you did it over WebSockets. Okay, how does the WebSocket look? Okay, use JSON. Why'd you choose JSON? Oh, okay, so you chose it for these reasons. Well, how do you determine versions between your games? Oh, okay, you built in a version. Oh, awesome, right? Like, there's like all these things you can kind of talk about versus it's just like, oh, you added clerk.js. Oh, okay, so you just said sign in and that's okay, cool. Oh, nice. Wow. Nice. A delete button on that to do. That's cool. Hey, cool job, man. What'd you use? Oh, okay. Use Mongo. Nice. Cool project, bro.
Multiplayer browser game.
You make it sound easy. No, I don't. I don't make it sound easy. That's why I said two very important phrases in there. One, you make something that's hard, a game. And two, when and if you get the chance to talk to somebody. And the person you talk to has to be a good interviewer. I feel like I made both sides pretty difficult. A, making game, not easy. Two, finding a human to talk to and not some AI robot or terrible interviewer. Also hard to do. There's quite a bit to that.
By the way, the game is already available. Source code up to the end of this video too, so check it out if you want,
Nice.
or stay to watch how I made it. So the basic idea is one-on-one turn-based tactics game played on a 2D grid where players move their tanks around the board and try to shoot the opponent. Instead of squares, I'm going to use the clearly superior hexagonal grid. And I want to limit players' field of view to some radius around their vehicles to add a level of uncertainty. The map will also shrink as the game progresses to prevent players from stalling. About the graphics for the game, I decided to go with the pixelated isometric aesthetics. I like this style, and some time ago I made a simple.
First off, so again, why is building a game really awesome? Like, this is really cool idea, right? I love
shrink as the game progresses.
Not only is there field of war or fog of war, which is really, really cool way to have this type of stuff. You also have like a battle royale style of the shrinking outsides. This is really, really good. This is a brilliant idea. So when you hear somebody, like, the reason why I think this stuff is so important is that when you hear somebody talk about this stuff, you can see that this guy cooked and he came up with a great idea. Right? So many concepts to talk about. Like, how did he store the hexagonal, the hexagonal data? How did he do that? Right? There's so many good things. I want to know how he did it. I actually hope that he talks about that.
This to prevent players from
I
stalling.
wonder how he set up the hex. Yeah, the hex is very,
About
very
the
interesting.
graphics for the game, I decided to go with the pixelated isometric aesthetics. I like this style, and some time ago I made a simple 3D renderer and some low-poly desert theme models, which I then used to generate sprites for the game. If you don't know what sprites are, they are a series of images that you can alternate to create an illusion of movement.
Nice.
The client side of the game will work in the language of the browser, JavaScript, but because I don't want to succumb to a vast pile of reference errors, I'm going to write it in TypeScript. For that, I will use the canvas HTML element, which provides an API to draw shapes, text, images, or even 3D scenes onto the screen.
I mean, he could have used JSDoc. That's all I'm saying. You could throw in the types where you need them. You could do a little DTS and have like little ambient types that you declare somewhere else. Then you don't have to compile. I'm just throwing that out. No build. Okay, hashtag that. Okay, pound no build. That's what I like to say. Pound no build.
And for the server side, I'm going to use the...
Someone saying Canvas coding is so hard. No, graphics programming is so hard. Canvas just makes graphics programming slightly harder due to the API. Like, that's really it. Okay, that's it.
HTML element, which provides an API to draw shapes, text, images, or even 3D scenes onto the screen.
Sorry, whoops.
And for the server side, I'm going to use the Google's Gopherlang.
Good choice.
I'm not going to use any frameworks or game engines because I'm doing it more for the process of doing than anything. But I'm going to use Gorilla WebSocket library, which at the moment is the de facto standard WebSocket implementation.
Good choice. Good choice right here. I think that you could totally write your own WebSockets, but I feel like you'd probably be spending a lot of time writing WebSockets instead of a game. This is good.
In Go.
This guy sounds excited.
To start off, I opened my favorite editor and began to work on making the canvas responsive so that game keeps resizing with the window and doesn't get blurry when user has non-standard device pixel ratio. Next, I worked on actually making the game display stuff on the canvas. Canvas provides you with a draw image function that basically copies a fragment of some image.
Dude, is he not using Copilot or ChatGPT to do anything? Like, how would you program without ChatGPT? Like, he didn't go one time. That web API is hell. It is hell. I do agree. Canvas is just, it has always been not a very fun world to be in. But, I might have to take a little adventure in Canvas land here at some point. Recorded in 2020.
And pastes it into a specified area. So beforehand, I packed all my sprites into a single PNG file and prepared a long list of start, size, and offset values for each of them, so that I can copy them out, use the offset to align them to the grid, and construct the map one element at a time, repeating this process on every frame.
Nice.
Next, I added the first bit of interactivity.
Do you think he did array of structs or struct of arrays? What are we talking about here? What do you think what kind of data structure are we talking about? By the way, TJ showed me what that means, and it's so awesome. Does it matter in JS? JS still holds references in contiguous memory space. So an array is still contiguous. It still exists that way. It's just every single value in JavaScript is a box value. So every single array you have is going to be an array of pointers effectively. Virtually no matter what you do. Numbers are the only ones that I believe don't follow that rule, which if you have a number that's less than 2 to the 32, I believe it falls under the SME category, small integer optimization, in which they tag the heap reference with I1, or I forget how it goes, and it says this is not a pointer, this is actually a number. This is why C is easier to reason about than JS. Well, I think the thing is that JavaScript has its benefits. And this is not one of its benefits, is thinking about how things are allocated.
Dragging them up, which is not too complicated and involves using just a single vector for offset value. With that, All
right, hold on. People are saying here, SME optimization V8. Where's the pointer compression? There you go. It's the pointer compression. Okay, okay, so it is at int 31. Okay, yeah, it is in 31. So it's not smaller than 2 to the 32. It's 2 to the 31, right? There you go. Can only carry a 31-bit payload. There you go. Nice. Nice. See, I knew there was like some small little thingy thing. Okay.
Some elements of the final architecture started to clear out, with game state object holding all the game object information as plain data, display driver drawing them, and game instance managing it all. Next piece of the puzzle will be grid component that will manipulate game objects based on user actions and server messages. After implementing dragging, I worked on zooming. The sprites must be scaled by natural numbers to keep them pixel perfect, which means the initial zoom would give a 100% jump in size. That's why I prepared sprites in two base sizes, 64 and 96 pixels, so that by interleaving them I can obtain smoother jumps.
Nice. Dude, he's going over so many, like, just so many amazing little facts. Right? The math is strong here. Yeah, this guy's going to get a job. Dude, hire this guy. All right, so the thing about game state, and Casey Moratori kind of walked me through this, so this was for my Zig game, is that every last part of my Zig game contained all the render state and all the game state in the same object. So here, I bet you I could bring this up. Vim with me, and I bet you I could find this again. Tower objects. So so this is Zig, by the way. So not only do I have just like my basic positioning and everything, I also have a bunch of rendering stuff, rendering size, my rendering ammo, my rendering cells, my rows, my columns. And by allowing that to happen, I could also put other things in here. Cells are just going to be, you know, like how I actually color it, right? It's going to have text and background color and all that kind of stuff. I can actually take all this information and I could alter it. Like you could imagine that I have something that makes it go up and down in values, and that could be all on the render side. So as I do my update, everything gets updated and all the values are set. And I technically could make a scrubber by saving every single game state to a file. I could actually make a scrubber and scrub through the game to where you can view everything, right? How great would that be? And so I do like that idea. Casey Moratori gave it to me, so I'm curious if he made the same thing where his game state is fully by itself.
So far, when implementing dragging and zooming, I only worked with screen coordinates. But to manipulate tanks, I need a way to translate between coordinates on the screen and coordinates on the grid.
What a time. By the way, that is actually a hard problem. Doing projections like this, it's not fun. Not fun. Are we going to ray trace? What are we going to do here?
Coordinates on the screen and coordinates on the grid. This was a little bit harder than I expected, and I was glad to come upon this nice website dedicated exclusively to hexagonal grids. With that, I was ready to begin tank navigation system.
Nice.
Users can perform two actions with a tank, either moving it or shooting in one of the 6 directions. Moving is carried out by pressing on the tank and dragging to a different hexes, and shooting by pressing it down for a tiny bit longer and releasing on selected direction. Range of a single move will be limited to some value, so players don't traverse the whole map in one turn, and same will be for the range of a shell. After that, I started working on adding 2 more features. One is limiting players' field of view, or fog of war, so that players can only see action happening inside some radius around their tanks, and the distant parts of the map are darkened out.
I love that, by the way. That is just so great that he did Fog of War. That just seems to make everything way more fun. Absolutely beautiful. And Handmade Hero Casey does hot reloading in C. Dang, that's pretty fantastic. Do you see how many cool things you get to talk about? Yeah, Thor would complain about, obviously, Fog of War on the client, right? That makes sense. You'd want Fog of War to be delivered down by the server. And I don't know if there's anything in here that says Fog of War isn't being sent down by the server. But if it isn't, obviously it's really easy just to get that information out, and then you can cheat. You'll know where all the tanks are, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't really matter, though. We're just appreciating. We're just trying to appreciate what's going on.
The second feature is drawing markers indicating cells that tank is allowed to move into. With regard to the current path and obstacles, it will be actually 2 different markers, green one taking neighboring tanks into account, and the yellow one ignoring them. Both can be calculated with a simple breadth first search. Then I began working on the UI system to display buttons on canvas on screens with different sizes. And
the nice part is with the breadth first search, you can limit it to the amount of spaces that the tank can move. And you could, I mean, theoretically, you could also just have, I assume, depending on how this board is set up, if you have some sort of 2D structure that you're laying out that actually shows how this is, if you can lay out a hex structure in memory as a 2D array, which I don't know how to do yet, I'd have to think about that. If you can do that, then you could actually just put something in each spot, some sort of value, like 0 means that they can't move in that space, 0.5 means they can move at half speed, which is pretty fun to be able to put something like a half speed movement. in there. So if you go across it, you actually use 2 of your allowed movements. A star wouldn't make any sense. The reason why A star doesn't make sense in here is that A star does not allow. A star is not generally used where there's more than one destination. A star is usually you have a source and a sink, and you're going to move in the most optimal way through it. And it uses just a variant on breadth first search to move through it. Whereas this one isn't that, right? It's a variant on Dijkstra's. Dijkstra's is a variant on breadth first search, just containing the distance, the summed minimal distance, effectively a min heap as how it determines the next node that you want to continue on your breadth first searching. Whereas A star does it even more. You can actually do A star. You have to have a destination. Why not just change the heuristics on A star? You can, but A star requires a destination.
Aspect ratios, I will need some substitute for CSS grid. I came up with an idea of invisible panels that will be resized and realigned on every change and will act as an intermediate grid for UI elements. They will be defined in 2 variants for vertical and horizontal screens. Implementing buttons from scratch is trickier than you might think, because in HTML DOM or UI libraries, you usually work with complete events like click or hover. But in this case, the buttons are just some painted area of canvas, so I will have to work my way up from simple primitives, pointer up, pointer down, and pointer move. And clicking a button isn't pressing the mouse on it, but rather releasing while hovering. And it's by design because it makes the action cancelable by moving the cursor out before release.
So what's it called? John Carmack actually talks about this, which is you do actions on down, not on release. But every now and then, I don't know if you guys have done this, I like to press down, and then I realize I don't like what I've done, and I move my cursor away and then release, and it works just fine. I don't know, that's a very interesting argument to do on down versus on release. You know, those are that's why you act on release. That's why people typically act on release, but he made a whole argument that you should act not on release, but you should act on press. John Carmack, right? Riz Daddy himself. There you go. Oh, look at that. Ooh, hold on just 1 second. Hold on just 1 second. I've been trying to send something nice and sweet to my wife on the regular. There you go. Let's see, act on press. This is a UI design hill I'll die on. And and it dismays me how often and hard I have to fight for it. Almost all interaction methods have a press and release event associated with them. Whenever possible, you should do the thing on the press event, right? Kind of wild, huh? I don't know, something about that whole, something about that interaction feels weird to me. Is this a tabs versus spaces thing? No, because there's a vast difference in performance and how the UI interacts. So I think this is a very different. You can't really break this down to the same thing where it's like, no, they are identical. It's just a user preference, right? He says whenever it's possible. Maybe the exception is UI. Maybe, but then I would have to argue, what else are you clicking on if it's not UI? It's objectively snappier on key down, yeah. I'm just saying, firing the gun. Okay, but yes, but I don't know if he's talking about that. I'm pretty sure he's not talking about that, right? Because this press and release event. Yeah, see, most button presses have well over 100 of milliseconds dwell time. There is a delight in interfaces that I feel like respond instantly to your wishes. So he's talking about buttons here. He also said UI hill, design hill, he attempts to die on. Yeah, so there you go. Anyways, all right, let's keep on going.
It gets more complicated with both the game area and the UI. We don't want to trigger the button when we are navigating the map, and likewise, we don't want the grid to respond to our mouse drag when we interact with UI.
Yep.
So I added some basic in-game buttons and a main menu. In the result, adding 2 more components to client architecture, the UI system drawn by display driver, and the notifier that will pass button and other game events from UI and grid to game instance. Up next
command
was
pattern,
finally
anybody?
Writing some server-side code. I set up a file server to serve static files and a WebSocket endpoint. For now, I wanted the server to receive players' intended moves, resolve them, and send back the results to client. Of course, I could write my own binary message format, but I'm going to keep things simple and just use the omnipresent JSON.
Like I said, great talk to have. We actually talked about this exact thing earlier. You have WebSockets, so how are you going to do it? Oh, I use JSON because honestly, it was just easier than writing my own binary format. I did consider it, but I wanted to finish the project, and I'm not going to simply die on that hill of this format. Awesome. This is great. This is absolutely great.
The WebSocket driver object on the client side will be responsible for exchanging the messages and notifying game of any updates. As you can see, the system takes collisions into account and correctly resolves them. As you can also see, the frontend is devoid of animations right now, and final result is displayed instantly on the map instead. I will tackle that later because I'm going to implement shooting first.
Yep.
For that, I again need to touch server-side code, add some constraints for how far can a projectile fly, check its path for any buildings and tanks, and if there are any, stop it early, and if it destroyed something, tell that to the client.
You know, there's this joke that exists that all game programming is just a bunch of loops and if statements.
To implement shooting first.
Look at that. Look at that beautiful for if. I mean, this is just absolute beautiful for and if statements. It's just loops and if statements. Loops and if statements. 8 space. Interesting. No, it's just because it's display. Go defaults to using tabs as its white space. Right? Loops, ifs, and bools. That's all it is. Peak game development. Peak game development is just a series, just a crazy amount of ints or of booleans, just flags everywhere. If statements of flags everywhere. And then loops, looping constantly. So it does look right here that player tanks, enemy tanks, he is doing he's not doing a struct of arrays. He is doing a map of tank ID to tank is probably what I'm guessing here.
First. For that, I again need to touch server-side code, add some constraints for how far can a projectile
Did you see that? Oh, I saw some Boolean flags there.
For any buildings and tanks, and if there are any, stop it early, and if it destroyed something, tell that to the client. What I also need is tracking each tank's visibility. Without that, everyone could have a wall hack and see all the opponent's moves on the map.
Yep.
And here's the result. Not only tanks can drive, but they also get destroyed when hit now. Enemy vehicles in the shadow stay invisible, but still no animations. So let's do that now. The animations are probably the most math-heavy part of this game. They also add a lot of unexpected complexity, because now I need to track time, correctly rotate tanks, turrets, interpolate positions. Also, the movement itself may be as complicated as you want. You can keep it simple with constant speed and sharp corners that will only involve some simple vector interpolation, but you can also run the path a little bit and add acceleration on start and finish to make it more natural. Or even add acceleration mid-drive to prevent weirdly fast corner entrances. Working with acceleration and distance will involve integrals.
So many Bezier curves. The man was Bezier curve maxing. I'm an actual game developer. Most of the times your game will run fine with looping over a game object update array. Yeah. Math is cool. Math is super cool, and it's super hard. Like everything that he did there again. That stuff is actually hard. This does not sound like a junior dev. Welcome to being a junior dev. Welcome to being a dev that does not realize how not junior you are. But this also goes to show this is part of the problem of the idea of junior devs in a nutshell, is that who decides what makes somebody a junior? Well, typically juniors is a state of professional experience. It's not a state of capability. If you haven't been in the industry ever, then you are, that's why I said professional experience. I didn't say experience, I said professional experience. Bros out there Bezier maxing with acceleration and deceleration around corners, or accelerating with the negative, in the negative direction, concave up and concave down. Shut up! Okay, we just use the term deceleration because it's easy. Everybody knows what it means. But nonetheless, this just goes to show you that this is one of the fundamental problems of trying to measure someone's ranking in the real world, which is just you can't, because it's not equal. But typically, if you hired this guy, what you're going to end up finding is that he probably will ascend to senior at a rate which is disproportional comparatively to somebody who, doesn't have the same kind of drive and experience internally. He will probably be a senior in like a year and a half. For me, it took me about a year and a half to get to senior because before I went out and worked in the real world, I spent 3 years building my own startup nonstop every day for 80 hours a week, just constantly all day, every day, all day, every day. And so by the time I got to the professional world and they're like, hey, can you fix this small bug in our zooming logic? I was like, bam, here you go. Because it's just like I knew what I was doing, right? It's just I have already spent all that time. So by the time I actually got somewhere or got into a job, it just didn't take that long.
But in this case, it's just calculating areas of triangles. Here's the final result. Movements look pretty smooth. I also added explosions and smoke from the cannons.
Nice.
These are just sprites too. I have 2 player matching modes in mind for this game. You can create or join your private room with a code, or you can enter an open room and get matched with a random player. Getting
Nice.
the code from players on desktop would be easy. We could just register the keystrokes, but I want mobile compatibility. How do I take input from mobile player using just canvas element? Custom virtual keyboard is an idea, but that's complicated. So I'm going to cheat a little bit and introduce an actual HTML input element into the game and style it to blend nicely. That breaks my abstractions a little bit, but it is what it is. At this point I was quite surprised it all works
Nice.
so well together.
By the way, that's really smart. See, again, what great things you get to talk about in an interview by doing this. Like, hey, how'd you do text input in the canvas? Well, actually, I overlaid an HTML element on top of it, so that way it worked easily within mobile and within desktop. Like, these are great things to talk about.
And started the hardest challenge of this project, namely the actual server-side logic for real multiplayer.
Yeah.
Because I'm writing it in Golang, I decided to abuse channels for the player room hub communication. What I got was a pretty messy maze of channel connections where I had to track which of them guarantee reads and which do not. I added state machines to make this mess more manageable and spent some time looking for possible coroutine leaks. The resolution of players' actions also changed somewhat, with input from 2 players that needed handling now, and while the logic might seem pretty simple, there's a lot of checks I have to perform to validate the actions. Just for the move action, I need to check if the path doesn't overlap, I need to check if the tank won't be blocked by other tank or a building, or it doesn't go through empty space. I need to check if path is continuous, if it doesn't exceed allowed range, if the tank is not...
By the way, this is why all of these actions, because he originally wrote a lot of it in JavaScript. If you're doing a game, as far as I can tell, obviously I've only built a couple small games, so please don't, I am no expert. But as far as I can tell, you want to really think about the server first, and you build out your game logic first on the server and figure out what you have to send to your clients such that you can have the nice, smooth animations and all that. Obviously, this scales with different games. I'm not saying I understand anything about Apex and how they do the predictive movements and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's way, way confusing. But in this type of game, you would want effectively the entirety of the game all on the server and just like the state updates onto the client. And then the client can be like, okay, this is how I animate the state updates. I know how to do the animations. You know how to actually play the game, right?
Already destroyed.
It's mostly to protect against brown hat hacking.
Yeah. Validating tank shots and also...
It's also to prevent yourself from doing all this logic in the UI to be like, the tank can't move through another tank. Well, don't, right? But the hard part is obviously the UI. You need to draw your path. And so you want your path to show up red or blue if it can do it. And so you end up, the hard part is how much duplicate logic do you really want? Do you want your server to tell you if the path is good or bad and why is it good or bad? But then you introduce some sort of a lag where you're drawing through and it shows up blue and then like 500 milliseconds later it shows up red at this one point. Little difficult here.
If it doesn't exceed allowed range, if the tank is not already destroyed. And I need similar checks when validating tank shots and also need to account for visibility between players. So there is a lot of bug potential here. There is also a lot of room for optimization too. Some loops may be redundant, some things could be represented as bit masks, but that's not today's concern.
Yep, good.
Writing this core multiplayer logic is a big milestone. Of course, it's not production ready yet, but the important thing is that two users can now play a game between them on two different devices. At the start of the video, I said that map will shrink throughout the match, and I haven't done that yet. Each game config will have a predefined shrinking rate, causing every hex and tank in some radius around the center to dissolve. Otherwise, players could drive around the map forever without ever engaging in a fight. By the way, so far I had neglected handling other messages from servers, such as room or server disconnecting, or even the final result, so I tackled that as well with a new model-like UI element. I also refactored the game class a little bit because the complexity was getting the best of me. The game still lacks any sounds, and I'm not going to create a soundtrack, but some sound effects, especially explosions, would be.
This is good. This is good. That was really, really good. I really liked the shrinking. The shrinking stuff is just, yeah. You could run that entirety off the server. That's the nice part, is that most of this is
some MP3s of a German.
So just to be real for everybody here, the hardest parts about this was most certainly the UI. The logic for this and all that is some pretty simple stuff. I know that doesn't sound real and you're just like, no way, but you gotta remember, like the rotating of the head and playing the correct sprite animation, that takes a lot of, like, that's gonna be a good amount of effort. But doing a breath first search to find out where you can go, being able to do fog of war by doing a simple breath first search and all that, like a lot of that stuff is actually not gonna be that hard. If you've just never done it, it takes time, but it's not like it's unsurmountable complexity. I think a lot of times people build up these weird things in their head that something is actually really, really complex. The concept is super complex, but then it ends up not actually being the same level of complexity in your head as it is actually on paper. And I just recently went through that because I recently just did what? What did we do? We just did our first little, I've never even done a reverse proxy before. So I knew I could draw out what I thought it was on paper, but I decided to just try out writing out a reverse proxy. And it was like terribly simple. Now I totally see exactly how I want to be able to wrap my communications protocol along with authentication and all those kind of things, because now it makes perfect sense. And now that I've done the reverse proxy, I'm like, oh, this is actually really, really simple to do. Okay, we could just totally get this done. And so it's so funny how that works, how you can make something super complicated and then you actually do it and you realize, oh, it's not all that complicated. I just made it complicated in my head. It's just a matter of time and learning.
On Leopard tank and explosions from Zapsplat, push some random buttons in Audacity and save them as a single MP3 file. I then encountered the audio context JS API for the first time, which was not too intuitive at first.
And yes, I did see Tarash's tweet about this is so funny because I actually wanted to just be like, yo, dog, it's actually shockingly simple. Hold on. Every time someone says the word proxy, I just assume they're a goddamn genius. Now, he may be talking about JavaScript proxies, which is the greatest way to write code that nobody can debug, including the person who wrote it. But I thought this was a funny tweet because I also had like the same kind of oopsie daisy in my head. What is this? Yes. The guy is fast forwarding through lines and lines of code like that. Those fast forwarding sessions could be 8-hour long programming sessions. You don't see all the difficulty. You also don't see him learning all the concepts first and then using it, right? There's like a whole bunch of extra stuff that's going on. And he even talks about it. When he's building the Go side of things, he is just absolutely writing spaghetti. And he's just like, I'm writing spaghetti. I don't know what's happening. I'm just trying. I don't know what I'm doing, right? Like, so you don't see all that. Yeah, you don't see all the prompting that's going on.
First, anyway, I managed to put it to use, hopefully without causing any memory leaks. Almost done, I added the last finishing touch, explosion shake. I remember seeing a video explaining using sine waves to simulate wobbling of the tree under the wind in some game once, and I thought it can simulate ground shaking from the explosion as well. The idea is to take a sine function, transform it with some random coefficients, repeat for a couple more, and sum them to get a rather random looking wave. Then make a second one and clamp them so they start and end at 0 and map as X and Y coordinates on a 2D surface to get a shake.
That was awesome. I've never thought about how to do a shake, and that was such a sweet explanation of doing a shake. That was, dude, that alone was, I mean, it makes perfect sense. You just have a few different sine waves, and then you sum them, and that will kind of give that weird shape to it. And then you just do two of them. You literally do two of them, one for X, one for Y, and then you just do like a linear tapering or some sort of tapering on top of it, and bada bing, bada boom. Dude, awesome.
The idea is to take a sine function, transform it with some random coefficients, repeat for a couple more, and sum them to get a rather random looking wave. Then make a second one and clamp them so they start and end at 0 and map as X and Y coordinates on a 2D surface to get a shake.
Nice.
And with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I linked their GitHub in the description. I also deployed the game and you can play it at TankOpsXYZ. To make that happen, I added some things that are out of the scope of this video. For example, OAuth 2, persistent DP, rate limiting, landing page, but also quick tutorial, single player mode.
By the way, he
more
does
explicit
mention
markers on tanks,
SQLite. Let's
HUD
go.
with game information and GitHub-like avatars, rotating tank in the main menu, speed up button, pin gesture for zoom on mobile, and probably some more smaller things I forgot about. But let's talk about what I did not do. I don't own any Apple devices, and it came as a surprise when I tested the game with my friend on his iPhone, and it got disconnected on every window change. Turns out that iOS aggressively throttles WebSocket connections in the background. I tried to make a not very reliable workaround by reconnecting on the client side after WebSocket close event and sustaining player's session for some period on the server, but surprise surprise, the iPhone closed the connection in a pretty unreliable way with different exit codes, different delays after resuming Windows session. So this hack went out the window.
It's actually really hard to do. I've been thinking about this. Reconnecting players, that's just not a trivial amount of code. It is a non-trivial amount of code, and it takes a lot of effort. Also, why do you think Apple has such great battery life? They're very aggressive at killing things in the background.
The correct way of handling that would probably be to preemptively close and open WebSocket connections on every window visibility change, but that would mean rolling this out for everyone because there isn't a reliable way to deduce a client's browser, and that's the worst UX for many users that do not require this solution. I might give it some more time in the future, but I will see. For now, thanks for watching.
It's now safe to turn off your computer. I do like that. It is now officially safe for you to turn off your computer, everybody. You can turn them off now. Oh, dude, what a great adventure. What a great adventure. I really loved that camera shake. What a fantastic thing. This alone, if you tried a little bit, you could turn this into a great short. Because it's absolutely beautiful. It's a perfect short. Oh man, you could do this. I am positive. I'm positive you could do this. A cajillion. Yeah, it has awesome visuals. It makes perfect sense. Beautiful. Beautiful. Great video. I'm gonna subscribe and I'm gonna like this one. Hey, go like the video. Go give it many hundred. There you go. How do I shoot guys? It's a good question. That makes me want to make a game from scratch. You should. It's part of the fun. It reminds me of 3 blue, 1 brown animations. Yeah. Like the video? Oh, we liked the video. Oh, we did. All right. I can hear my beautiful wife playing around back there. Andres T. Dev, thank you for the 50K flex. The name is we're slowly becoming a game dev. I can feel it happening. A gen.